Hi.
I felt his hands on my waist before I even realized he was behind me. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through the thin fabric of my dress as I stood at the farmer's market stall, pretending to examine tomatoes I had no intention of buying. Those aren't the best ones. His voice was low, amused, close enough to my ear that I could feel his breath. I turned, meeting eyes the color of summer storms, and something shifted in the air between us. His smile was slow, knowing, like he, could see right through my careful composure to the restless energy I'd been carrying all morning. I'd come to the market for vegetables. I was leaving with something entirely different. The way he looked at me, like he was already imagining peeling, a way more than just the layers of my careful weekend routine, made my pulse quicken in a way I hadn't felt in months. When he asked if I wanted to see his farm, his voice carrying promises I wasn't sure I was ready for, I said yes before my mind could catch up with my body's immediate response. Hey, if you're already feeling the heat, tap that like button and hit subscribe. This is just the beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss where this goes. The drive to his place was 15 minutes of loaded silence, his hand resting on the gear shift close enough to brush my knee every time he changed direction. I watched his profile, the way his jaw tightened when he caught me staring, the casual confidence in how he navigated the winding country roads like he owned them. Maybe he did. The farmhouse appeared through a line of oak trees, weathered wood, and wide windows that caught the afternoon light. It looked like the kind of place where time moved differently, where city urgency dissolved into something slower, more deliberate. Wine? He asked as we stepped onto the porch, but his eyes were already asking something else entirely. I nodded, following him through a screen door that creaked with character. The kitchen was all exposed beams and worn countertops, herbs hanging in bundles from the ceiling, the kind of lived-in space that spoke of someone who knew how to use their hands. He moved with easy familiarity, uncorking a bottle of red that probably came from grapes he'd grown himself. I accepted the glass, our fingers brushing in the exchange, a spark of contact that made me wonder if he'd planned it. The wine was rich, earthy, with undertones that seemed to mirror the man who'd made it. Good? He asked, stepping closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. The question hung between us, loaded with double meaning. Very, I managed, though whether I was talking about the wine or the way he was looking at me, I couldn't say. His smile suggested he knew the difference didn't matter. The afternoon blurred into evening as we talked, his voice drawing stories from me I hadn't planned to share. He listened with an attention that felt rare in a world of constant distraction, asking questions that showed he was hearing not just my words, but the spaces between them. When he laughed at something I said, the sound was genuine, unguarded, and I felt myself leaning into it, into him, into this unexpected connection that had bloomed from a chance encounter over produce. As the sun began to set, painting the kitchen in shades of gold and amber, he moved closer again. This time there was no pretense of reaching for wine or asking casual questions. His hand found my face, thumb tracing the line of my cheek with a gentleness that made my breath catch. "I've been wanting to do this since I saw you at the market," he murmured, his voice rough with honesty. When his lips met mine, the kiss was everything the afternoon had been building toward. Slow, exploring, full of promise. I melted into him, my hands finding the solid warmth of his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath my palms. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and necessary, weeks of city stress and careful boundaries dissolving under his touch. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. I could taste the wine on his lips, feel the day's warmth still radiating from his skin. When we finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, his forehead rested against mine. "Stay," he said simply, the word carrying weight beyond its simplicity. There was no pressure in it, just an invitation offered with the same straightforward honesty he'd shown all day. I looked into those storm-gray eyes and found my answer in the way my body was already responding to his nearness. I didn't trust my voice, so I answered by reaching for the buttons of his shirt instead. His sharp intake of breath as my fingers worked the fabric told me everything I needed to know about his own barely controlled restraint. The shirt fell away, revealing skin tanned from hours in the sun, muscles earned through honest work rather than gym routines. I ran my hands over his chest, marveling at the contrast between the roughness of his palms and the gentleness of his touch as he began to explore the curves hidden beneath my dress. The fabric whispered to the floor, and I felt his gaze like a physical caress as he took in what I'd revealed. There was reverence in his eyes, appreciation that went beyond the merely physical. When he reached for me again, his movements were deliberate, savoring, like he wanted to memorize every inch of skin his fingers discovered. He lifted me easily, carrying me through the house to a bedroom where evening light filtered through gauze curtains, casting everything in soft shadows. The bed was unmade, sheets rumpled in a way that spoke of mornings lingered in rather than rushed through. He set me down gently, his hands never leaving my skin, maintaining the connection that had been building between us all day. What followed was a dance of discovery, each touch revealing new depths of sensation. His mouth traced patterns across my collarbone down the valley between my breasts, each kiss sending spirals of heat through my core. I arched beneath him, fingers tangling in his dark hair, holding him close as he continued his methodical exploration. When he finally moved, above me, positioning himself between my thighs, his eyes met mine. "You're sure?" he asked, though his body was taut with restraint, ready but waiting for my consent. The question was unnecessary. I'd been sure since that first touch at the market, but I appreciated that he asked anyway. "Yes," I breathed, and he lowered himself into me with a control that spoke of experience, of patience, of a man who understood that the best pleasures were worth taking time with. The sensation of being filled, completed by him was overwhelming in its rightness. We fit together like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known was incomplete. He moved with a steady rhythm that built slowly, each thrust deliberate and measured. His hands roamed my body, finding sensitive spots that made me gasp and arch beneath him. The calluses on his palms created delicious friction against my skin, a reminder of the hands that had grown the grapes that made the wine that had brought us to this moment. I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, needing more, of this connection that felt both physical and spiritual. His pace quickened in response, his breathing becoming ragged as he fought to maintain control. The tension built between us, a coiling spring of desire that threatened to snap at any moment. When it finally did, when the waves of pleasure crashed over me in rapid succession, I cried out his name into the gathering darkness. He followed moments later, his body shuddering against mine as he found his own release, my name falling from his lips like a prayer. We lay tangled together afterward, skin cooling in the evening air, hearts gradually slowing to normal rhythms. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my back, and I felt more relaxed than I had in months. The city stress, the careful boundaries I maintained in my daily life, all of it felt very far away. "I should probably head back," I said eventually, though I made no move to leave the warmth of his embrace. The practical part of my mind was reasserting itself, reminding me of the life waiting for me in the city, the restaurant where I worked, the responsibilities I couldn't ignore indefinitely. "Should you?" he asked, his arms tightening slightly around me. "Or could you stay just a little longer?" There was something vulnerable in the question, a hint that this afternoon had meant something to him too, that I wasn't just another weekend distraction. I stayed. Through the night, through multiple awakenings where we reached for each other in the darkness, through shared whispers and quiet laughter and moments of connection that went far beyond the physical. Each time felt different, sometimes urgent and desperate, sometimes slow and tender, always with an intensity that left me breathless. As dawn broke through the gauze curtains, painting everything in soft pastels, I finally forced myself to untangle from his warmth. He watched me dress with sleepy eyes, not trying to convince me to stay but not hiding his reluctance to see me go either. "Will I see you again?" he asked as I reached for my shoes, and I heard the uncertainty he was trying to hide. This successful, confident man who commanded respect at the farmer's market, who had made me feel more alive in one afternoon than I had in months, was vulnerable in this moment of potential goodbye. I kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything I felt but couldn't articulate into the touch of lips and tongue. When we broke apart, his smile told me he'd understood what I couldn't say with words. The drive back to the city was quiet, my mind replaying every moment of the previous day and night. My skin still carried his scent, my body still hummed with the memory of his touch. At red lights, I found myself touching my lips, remembering the way he'd kissed me like he was trying to memorize the taste. But life has a way of reasserting itself. Work demanded my attention. Friends wanted to hear about my weekend, though I kept the details carefully vague, and the routine of city living pulled me back into its familiar rhythms. Days passed, then a week, and still I found myself thinking about storm-gray eyes and calloused hands and the way he'd said my name in the darkness. The farmer's market came around again, and I told myself I was going for vegetables, nothing more. Just the weekly shopping I'd been doing for months before I met him. But my heart raced as I approached his stall, and I realized I was hoping to see that familiar figure among the displays of fresh produce. He was there, arranging tomatoes with the same careful attention I remembered. When he looked up and saw me, his smile was instant, genuine, full of warmth that made my knees weak. "The vegetables are better this week," he said, echoing his first words to me, and I laughed despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. "Are they?" I managed, moving closer to his stall, to him. The other customers faded into background noise as we looked at each other, the memory of everything we'd shared hanging between us like a tangible thing. "Definitely," he said, his voice lower now, intimate despite the public setting. "Though, I might be biased. I've been thinking about a particular customer all week, wondering if she might come back for more than just produce." The heat in his gaze told me he wasn't talking about vegetables, and I felt that familiar warmth spreading through my body, the same instant response I'd had to him from the beginning. "She might," I said carefully, "if the farmer was interested in more than just making a sale." His smile widened, and he leaned closer across the display of vegetables. "The farmer is very interested," he said quietly. "In fact, he's been hoping she might want to see how the other crops are growing. Maybe stay for dinner this time, maybe stay longer." The invitation hung between us, loaded with possibility. I thought about my careful city life, my routines and responsibilities, the walls I'd built around myself. Then I looked into his eyes and remembered how alive I'd felt in his arms, how right everything had seemed in his bed. "I'd like that," I heard myself say, and watched his face light up with something that looked very much like relief. This time, when we left the market together, it felt less like an impulse and more like a choice, a conscious decision to step away from the safe boundaries of my controlled life and into something uncertain, but infinitely more alive. The drive to his farm felt different this time, still charged with anticipation, but tempered with a deeper understanding of what we were choosing. This wasn't just about physical attraction anymore, though that was certainly still there, crackling between us like electricity. This was about connection, about two people who had found something rare and worth pursuing. Back at his farmhouse, we moved with less urgency but no less passion. He cooked for me this time, his hands skilled in the kitchen as they were everywhere else, preparing a meal from ingredients he'd grown himself. We talked more freely, sharing stories and dreams and fears with the ease of people who'd already been intimate in the most fundamental way. When he reached for me after dinner, when we came together again in his bed with the familiarity of lovers who'd found their rhythm, it felt like coming home. Every touch was both new and remembered, every kiss a rediscovery of something precious. But as perfect as it was, as right as it felt to be in his arms again, I knew I couldn't stay forever in this bubble we'd created. Real life waited, with all its complications and demands. The question was whether what we'd found together was strong enough to survive the transition from fantasy to reality. "What are we doing?" I asked him in the quiet hours before dawn, when honesty comes easier, in the darkness. "I mean, really doing? This isn't just a weekend escape anymore." He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still tracing patterns on my skin. "I don't know," he said finally. "But I know I don't want it to end. I know that this week without you felt longer than the months before I met you. I know that whatever this is, it's worth figuring out." His honesty deserved the same in return. "I've never felt anything like this," I admitted. "You make me feel like a different person, a better person, someone braver and more alive than I thought I could be." "You are that person," he said, turning to face me in the dim light. "You were before you met me. I just get to see it." As the sun rose again, painting the world in shades of gold and possibility, I made another choice. Instead of rushing back to the city, instead of pretending this was just another pleasant interlude, I called in sick to work. For the first time in years, I chose to stay exactly where I was, in the arms of a man who saw me completely and somehow loved what he found there. We spent the day exploring his land, walking through rows of vegetables and fruit trees, his hands pointing out the careful cultivation that went into everything he grew. He showed me the process, the patience required, the way good things took time to develop properly. I couldn't help but think he was talking about more than just agriculture. That afternoon, as we lay in a patch of sunlight in his bedroom, skin warm and damp with the afterglow of lovemaking, he asked me something that changed everything. "Move in with me," he said simply, his fingers tracing the curve of my hip. "Not forever, not unless you want to, but try it. See what it feels like to wake up here every day, to build something together." The suggestion should have terrified me. It was too fast, too risky, too far outside the careful plans I'd made for my life. But lying there in his arms, surrounded by the peace and possibility of his world, it felt like the most natural thing imaginable. "Yes," I said, and felt the last of my carefully constructed walls crumble completely. The transition wasn't seamless. There were practical concerns to work out, a lease to break, a job to leave, friends and family who thought I'd lost my mind. But every morning I woke up in his arms, every evening we cooked together in his kitchen, every night we came together with a passion that never seemed to diminish. I knew I'd made the right choice. Months later, as I tended to the garden we'd planted together, watching the first green shoots push through the soil, I thought about that day at the farmer's market. How a simple decision to buy tomatoes had led to the complete transformation of my life. How sometimes the best things happen when you're brave enough to say yes to the unexpected. He found me there among the rows of vegetables, wrapping his arms around me from behind in an echo of that first touch that had started everything. "Any regrets?" he asked, his lips warm against my neck. I leaned back into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, the rightness of us together. "Only that I waited so long to find you," I said, and meant every word. Some connections change, everything in an instant, while others grow slowly over time. But the best ones, the ones that last, are the ones brave enough to bloom in unexpected places. Have you ever taken a chance on something that seemed too good to be true? What would you have done in my place? Played it safe or followed your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe for more stories that might just inspire you to take your own leap of faith. Thanks for being here with me today.
Bye.